I wanted to talk about the Lions, wanted to get your takes on the season as a whole. I know people are disappointed, but that last game seemed like a little bit of an inflection point here. I'm curious where you stand on it, because I tend to be more optimistic, but especially finishing the season that way, beating Ben Johnson twice, going 9-8, finishing with a above 500 record, still basically swapping the most difficult opponent schedule with the Bears, because the Bears go to 1 and the Lions go to 4 this year. All of that happening, plus having a little bit better pick, I feel like that's not a bad end to what ultimately was a disappointing season compared to what we had as the expectation at the beginning of the season, coming off a 15-2 season.
Yeah, and I think you're right, how it is pretty fortuitous how they thread the needle nicely of still getting the 17th overall pick while having a last place schedule. You're not going to find that often. So that worked out kind of nicely. That's something to build off of. And I think how Dan Campbell said it, I believe, on Monday, that they're going to make this matter. Maybe this happened for a reason. Like, they're going to make the most of this opportunity. And maybe for longevity purposes, for sustainability, they needed to be punched in the mouth by some of those better defenses and to have a wake-up call on where they were going with roster building and decisions they were making with philosophy. So, yeah, I don't know. I would probably be huffing and puffing right now if they hadn't beat the Bears. That was a nice silver lining, especially since they kind of dictated that game. They took the ball, they went down, they really played a good game of keep away from Caleb Williams, I thought, and that seemed to be the goal, was to try and get up, take the ball away from him, not let them run often. They did a good job by shutting down the run game, which we hadn't seen that as much as of late. And then the other promising thing was Calvin Shepard seemed to be a little more malleable than maybe we thought, because he ended up playing zone coverage on over 90% of Caleb Williams' dropbacks. So, he's still in the first year of defense coordinator. He's still learning it on the fly. A lot's happening. I thought there was a lot of promising things. But I do think really that week one is going to linger with us, that Packers game, and then how ugly that Vikings first loss was, and the 3-game losing streak. So I think there are things that are going to leave a bad taste in the team's mouth that they're going to want to build off of and build their team so that doesn't happen again.
I think there's multiple great points in there. One, I want to start with the Kelvin Shepard thing, because I do think that I know that people were kind of hard on him and the situation, as far as obviously he had the coordinators turning over, but there was the element of I don't know why the visual was a little bit different for the fans, how they took things in, because I felt like this year's injury issues were as significant or almost as significant on the defensive side. That's hard to do, and we don't need to get into the weeds and compare all that, but missing that safety pair at the end of the season and having all those defensive backs gone at the same time had to be tough to plan around for Shepard. I know he wasn't making excuses with that, and you shouldn't, and it's football, and you have to play through that. But I'm with you. I think the fact that he was able to find some things by the end of the season and do some learning himself probably helped him stay on the good side of things, versus once Morton was removed, there wasn't a lot of coming back from that. He gets let go. We'll talk about that and potential replacements for him and how you foresee that going. But I'm with you on the big picture too. You have the fact that I love what Holmes and Campbell have done so far. I think they have a very good track record, but it probably maybe they needed a step back to take 2 steps forward here and say, okay, we've got to tweak what we're doing too, because not only are we tweaking things within the organization and making the players and other coaches tweak things, but hey, maybe we need to do it as well, because the strategies that we were using, even though they might have been, some of them fairly well conceived, and yes, things happen, that led to some strife that maybe could have been avoided by some different moves at the beginning of the season. So I'm with you that it might be a 1 step back, 2 steps forward kind of thing.
Yes, totally agreed. And I will say the safety aspect, while they were dealing with the Terrion Arnold and DJ Reed injuries, is, kind of critical because this defense, they made a point to re-sign Kirby Joseph, and we're probably, and still might, give an extension of some sort to Brian Branch. So they place a premium on how much their safety play dictates that defense because they want to live in a world where they get to play that single high. Like, they want to play more single high safety than just about anyone in the league. I know, Jim Schwartz will do it, and so will Vic Fangio, but they really want to play single high and mix and match those two, and it requires a certain skill set for both of them. It requires versatility there. So, just the fact that they were ready to have Avonte Maddox, Thomas Harper step in, kind of just shows you that they were prepared and placed a premium on how much the safeties mean to this defense. And I do think the safeties getting hurt did also impact the run defense to some degree. There's no excuse for some of the regression in run defense in the back half of the season, especially from yards allowed after contact. I mean, guys were just having more open lanes than we've seen in 3 years, So I do think it is pretty underrated what Shepard overcame from that aspect.
I'm glad you mentioned that about the run defense, because obviously that defensive line is built for the run defense element. That's been, I think, the argument of fan versus team on the whole defensive end situation opposite Hutchinson. The team is going for somebody that is more stout against the run, and obviously the fans want somebody that can do both. They want a Myles Garrett, Max Crosby type, because you always want kind of the premium position, the premium players at their position. But that's, I think, the main disconnect there. But I do think it's underrated that you highlighted it well. The safeties are very important. They're a key part to this team. But also the cornerbacks are pretty key with the run support as well. And although people may have their problems with Arnold, he was pretty stout in run support for a cornerback, and that was one of the strengths, in my opinion, of his game throughout this season, this injury-riddled season. So that still, I'm with you, that still shouldn't make the defensive line, that they should be the ones that are holding up against the run, especially with pretty good linebacking over the course of the year. That was still something that probably needs to be addressed in the offseason. But it's worth noting because the defensive backs are key both to the formation element that you highlighted and to the run support.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said Terrion too, because he is an absolute plus player as a cornerback in run defense. I mean, he is. And especially playing man coverage, you got to be ready to do that because you might, you're used to turning your back half the play. It's not like you're sitting there in zone and you're just sitting watching the eyes. So he's able to come down and fill the run pretty well. I thought DJ Reed did an okay job with that. Looking to see more from him, but he wasn't the same player after that hamstring. So he deserves a reset next year in the evaluation of DJ Reed opposite Terrion Arnold. But yeah, the DBs are critical. But I will say one other aspect of the run defense. Once Levi Onwuzurike and Josh Paschal were hurt, that really messed with the optionality they really like when they do those 5-down defensive fronts, because there really wasn't a perfect fit there. I mean, they were playing Pat O'Connor there to start the year. There was a lot of Lacey and Wheat who were just grabbed in the end of August, and eventually it became well broadcast. They were playing Ali McNeil there, who just a 320-pound man after his injury is always better in year 2 than year 1 after the injury. So it really stunk that they weren't able to play that 5-man front that they really were pretty good at in 2024. That was another aspect that was just lacking, and throughout the season they just couldn't find answers there.
A lot of great points in there, too. You reminded me, too, I forgot that we share this. We are both Levi Onwuzurike fans here, because awesome. I do think he was a player that was missed this season. He wasn't talked about a lot, but because of the schematic flexibility that he provides, and I thought obviously now we kind of see why maybe he signed for such a cheap deal, but the deal that they got on him and the play that they had last year, I thought he was kind of an underrated player, because it is hard to see some of those interior guys what they're doing. doing. I mean, it's like signing DJ Reader and then looking at his statistics. But I mean, it's hard to do that. You need to see his impact on the field. You need to see how they're affecting the linebacking unit and the rest of the defense as a whole. But I really thought he was a key piece. And once he was out, it was clear, and Pascal too, but especially Levi. I do think that they were missed this year, and I forgot that you are the head of the fan club for Levi.
Fan club for Levi, yeah. I mean, because Levi gave a lot of underrated reps towards the end of that 2023 team. You know, he was starting to get 10, 15 snaps a game, and we were seeing some life. And then he ended up leading the team in quarterback pressures with 47 last year. Very underrated. He had more than obviously Hutchinson and McNeil, who both got injured in 2024. But Levi, I kind of think of it like, if you look at the things that Leonard Williams opens up for the Seattle Seahawks, or Zach Allen, what he does for the Denver Broncos, and there's some other good examples in the league, but like, he was built for that 5 technique, right? Like, head up with that offensive tackle. He can shade in as like a 4-eye, but like, he can just kind of kick butt on the offensive tackle or the guard, and it just gives him so much optionality from a scheme point. And it was unfortunate that he wasn't part of it.
I agree. I have an outside hope that they'll try to take a run at him, even given the injury. But we'll talk about that after the break here, because I want to talk about kind of your plan for the offseason. Obviously, the offensive coordinator is the big topic of discussion, but also retaining some players and where you think they're going with everything. But we'll get Al Carson's take on the offseason after the break. Stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. Coming back here with Al Karsten, having a good conversation with him from Pride of Detroit here, and talking about some of the nuances of the Lions season. I'm curious where you see things going here. Obviously, the discussion is on the offensive coordinator right now. It's kind of early you can throw some names out there, and I think they threw out 2 in the press conference today. And Mike McDaniel is going to be a popular name, I think, in the offseason, because he's one of the ones coming from a head coach role that thrived in an offensive coordinator role. I don't know if his vibe matches the Lions. That's the one part. I look at him as almost the anti-Campbell to a degree. As far as head coaches went, that was where Campbell came from, was Miami, and then McDaniel took over. And I've told several people, I've basically put them on opposite ends of some sort of spectrum in the NFL. So I don't know if that would match up. And then the other one is David Blau, who's kind of ascending the coaching ranks after his career ended, shortly after his Detroit time.
Yeah, Blau, I just think there's a chance he's a hit, but I think he's still, a little green in that area. He'd be more suited as a passing game coordinator if they were to move on from someone like David Shaw. But I don't know. I think you might be judging, a book by its cover on Mike McDaniel a little bit. I mean, he was with the Falcons when Dan Quinn was there, and Dan Quinn's kind of a no-nonsense guy. And, he also was under Shanahan for a long time. And Mike McDaniel, he did overcome the adversity of, alcoholism. And, I think he is he could meld well with Detroit. I mean, he uses fullbacks. I mean, the Dolphins love using Alec Ingold, and I think it could be a good mixture of, he is competitive, even if he looks, like meek, mild-mannered. Like, he's a competitive, fiery dude based on all accounts from players and everything. And I think it could be a good mixture with Dan Campbell. I think, he could extract some of the best elements of Dan Campbell, and that would most enhance his candidacy to be a head coach again. And vice versa. Like, I think it could, a little bit of that friction with Dan Campbell could really uplift some of the elements of this offense and add to it and complement it. And because right now the offense this past year, for the most part, felt like stripped down, like they were trying to keep the same elements that Ben Johnson had with the duct tape, bubblegum, paper clips and stuff, like towards the end there. So I really like Mike McDaniel. I'm more intrigued by him. I thought about it throughout the season as an option. They had the winning streak to the end of the year, but I think he actually could be a tremendous fit for them.
I'm actually with you. I'm saying that a little bit tongue-in-cheek. I think it's the sunglasses that he wears to a degree.
Sunglasses, it's the designer clothes. Because I had multiple group chats saying similar things about him. Because he's definitely a unique character. And I mean, he was a wide receiver at Yale too, who was known for his blocking prowess, and he was a ball boy with the Denver Broncos when he was a kid. So he's tough skinned. They'd give him crap. Like I by all accounts, like I think he's a football guy. It just doesn't come off his appearance by the sunglasses and the $100,000 watches and stuff.
And you bring up a good point that I typically bring up about Campbell, because we know this being in the market, but I feel like a lot of people look at Campbell and it's like we want to make people into one thing, because we can't process them being layered and multiple things, and everybody's multiple things. But we look at Campbell and we go, he can't be smart because he's tough, former tight end, bite him at the kneecaps guy from the press conference. So he can't look like that and also be smart. But we know that he's got a good feel for the game, that he has a lot of expertise. But when you compare him to, say, like a Ben Johnson or a Sean McVay or a Mike McDaniel, you have to kind of put them in that category, because you can't exactly look at them and say, oh, well, yeah, Mike McDaniel with those sunglasses looks tough, but it doesn't mean he can't be tough. He just is built in more of a slight manner. Doesn't mean he's not tough. Doesn't mean he didn't come up through the ranks, like you said. And I think you highlighted a point in there that I think is a good one. I think they've done, you said this in the first segment, and I think it was one of the better points in the first segment out of many, but you were talking about how maybe it's something where Holmes and Campbell needed a little bit of a wake-up call. Maybe McDaniel is the result of the wake-up call from Campbell's side of things, because he's had a tendency to hire people that he's very familiar with, people that are a little bit more grizzled and old school to a degree, whereas McDaniel may be that counterpart that he needs on offense to say, no, I can be the Ben Johnson to your Dan Campbell and bring out kind of the more explosive side, and not necessarily be as old school as a Morton, who struggled to get to that part, keeping the defense on their heels. And I mean, McDaniel is going to be one of the most coveted people in this coordinator cycle, because I mean, the guys that come from being a head coach and clearly were good at the coordinator side of things. He worked with a lot of talented folks, as you highlighted. I do think he's going to be one of the most coveted ones, and the Lions have got to have one of the top jobs out there from an offensive coordinator standpoint.
Oh yeah, I think something that John Morton failed at was play sequencing and setting up plays, within the same look, formation, same motion, and then exposing the defense with counter punches. And I think the play design and play sequencing by Mike McDaniel is pretty extravagant. Like I think it really could uplift what the Lions currently have.
Exactly. That was a part that I think Campbell was trying to fix, because I do think he has some skill with that, but then there was the bandwidth issue of having to call plays and do all the other things that he does. So I think everybody is leaning towards, okay, we got to get a play caller in here. But what are some of the other priorities in your mind? I think people are kind of expanding too far. They're kind of going into a little bit of a spiral of, oh, well, we have so many things to fix. Well, a 9-8 team that had a lot of injuries, it might not be as dire. So I think they're more centralized, but I wanted to get your opinion on that and kind of what the offseason priorities will be after kind of working out the coaching situation here.
Yeah, and I think whatever the coaching situation is, should also enhance the ability, put the offensive line in a better position to succeed. I don't know if necessarily the run game design and game plan this year, and some of that might fall also on the shoulders of Hank Fraley being a first-year run game coordinator with room to improve. Is whatever we do at offense coordinator, I think it'll automatically put the offensive line in a better position to succeed. Like that's one small half step forward if we find the right play caller. But then next is really solidifying the offensive line in the immediate, but also the future. I mean, you got to bring in someone who's not as limited of a mover at center. I think that there was a lot of, like, obviously you didn't see one time, the Lions pulling Graham Glasgow or Tristan Colon, or Kingsley Agwakin did pull once, and then he also had a screen. But like the way they used to move Frank, about one time, two times a game, but like his ability to get to the second level is something that Graham Glasgow didn't, where, if it was just one more block, they cut off. So a more capable center, I think, really is the priority there. and I know everybody's, wants to say Tyler Linderbaum from Baltimore, but there's no way Eric DeCosta lets him walk. That fifth-year option was just too expensive for a center. That's unfair. But, if they can get someone like a Connor McGovern from the Bills, who's Frank Ragnow's age, because the Bills have a number of other free agents like David Edwards, and they need to get a wide receiver one in there. If Connor McGovern's on the market and they pay him top dollar, that really fixes the offense. And then I'm not even as worried about Christian Mahogany. Cade Mays from the Panthers, I think, could be a good one. So, I would like to see what they can do with a veteran center, but also bring in a center of the future, within at least one of the fourth-round picks, if not the second-round pick, So let's do that. And really, one of the first two picks probably should be an offensive tackle, because you're not getting any tackles that are worth their salt in free agency for the most part. So, and you got to find them early in the draft. So I wouldn't be surprised if first or second round is a tackle. Hopefully it doesn't have to play right away. Hopefully they get Taylor Decker back. But I mean, his whole regimen, daily, weekly, this past season sounded insane, and he called himself selfish. So it's fixing that offensive line to start, and then everyone's going to say it, but defensive end. They need a more better every down defensive end, opposite of Aiden Hutchinson.
I agree with all of those, and I think it's not necessarily that expansive beyond that. I mean, that's why I wanted to have the summary from you, because I think we're kind of going into the death spiral piece for a 9-8 team, but of like, oh, okay, well, no, we got to fix this, fix that, with a lot of the expected returns from the players that were out this year, and all of the things that you mentioned. I think those are the issues. I like that you highlighted the Linderbaum thing, because of course that's where everybody's mind is going to go. It's kind of like the Garrett option or the Crosby option at defensive end. Right. It's just not that realistic. And so, especially with budget issues pending, having to re-sign some players and all of that, I like that as far as veteran combined with a rookie, because I do think that I agree on the tackles. I think they're in a good position to draft a tackle in the first round as far as valuation goes, and where things should kind of line up for them at 17. But also, this seems to be a deeper class for centers to me. When I look at somebody, and this is spoken as an Indiana alum, so I'm a little bit biased. I've seen him play all season, but if you've got right now, PFF has Pat Coogan at 155 or 160. He's in the 160s, I think, as far as ranking. Obviously, a lot of that's going to move as we go through evaluations and the offseason and the combine, but there does seem to be some depth in this center class. So getting a guy that you can develop behind a veteran, I like that, because that's what I think that's why the offensive line works so well. They had those 3 points where you had, for the last few years, you had Decker at one end, Ragnow in the middle, and Sewell at the other end, and then that made you get away with a little bit more at the guards. And now that you take that centering piece, the center out of the middle, I think that weakened the guards. Whereas if you can reinforce that middle, I think you can get back to kind of what they had before. And Mahogany doesn't look quite as bad with recovering from his injuries and reinforcing some of those other parts around him. So I do think offensive line is going to be a priority, though, and it doesn't seem to be a bad draft to do it in.
No, it's great. It's an ideal draft for those positions, honestly. Tackle, center, guard, like you said, Pat Coogan from Indiana. But even if they go a little earlier with Connor Lew from Auburn coming off the injury, or Jake Slaughter from Florida, and then I feel like a lot of Lions fans already like the idea of Logan Jones as well from Iowa. So there's some good boys up front at center, like you said. In addition to Pat Coogan, I have a friend who he's probably sent me like 10 mocks this week, and I swear Pat Coogan's his guy in like the fourth round every time.
It's a good positioning with their picks, because I have a tendency to do that too. That's the one I always want, except when he gets stolen above the pick there. But it does make sense. But all those, I'm glad you highlighted those other guys, because they're all worth mentioning. They're a little bit earlier, maybe not, depending on where Jones lies. He's kind of after Coogan right now. But I think valuation wise, once they go through the process, he could get a pretty big bump. But all those guys could be the center of the future at either a day 2 or day 3 pick, and that's kind of what you want at this point. But really appreciate you joining the show. Glad we could do it here. Been wanting to do it for a while, and we'll look forward to having you back on. But tell people where they can follow you here in the meantime.
Always check out my work and all the other great work at pridedetroit.com, led by Jeremy and Eric, everybody there, but also just football guy _Al on Twitter.